Right. The last part of the forms of sentences. So this one is compound complex sentence. It's a hybrid between compound and a complex sentence. Right, so let's see what does it mean. So a compound complex sentence contains two independent clauses. So there are two independent clauses, two clauses which are complete, and one dependent clause. So you this time it's two versus one. All right. So two versus one. So one, two independent, one dependent. Right. Put a comma after the dependent clause if it begins the sentence. Put a comma after the dependent clause if it begins the sentence. So if dependent clause is in the beginning of the sentence, you need to have a comma, just like complex sentence earlier. All right, put a comma before the fanboys. Example, and but or that connects to independent clause. All right, if you still remember, compound sentence is formed using two independent clauses. Right? When you have two independent clauses, you need to have a coordinating conjunction or one of the fanboys to combine these two clauses. So because a compound complex sentence has two independent clauses, because compound, so two independent clauses, that's why you would have one of the coordinating conjunctions to combine it, right? So put a comma before the fanboys, right, to connect the two independent clauses. Okay, if this is not clear, let's look at the examples. Okay, after the two adversaries had spent years playing the cat and mouse game, they were joined by their children, and the fun continued. Right. The first part of the sentence, if you notice, after. After is a subordinating conjunction. So basically, this whole part of the sentence is a dependent clause. So we have one dependent clause. So it means that we have another two clauses which are independent clause. Okay. They were joined by their children. So they were joined by their children is the first independent clause. And then you have this one, and which is fanboys. Right? Remember, there's a comma. There's a comma before fanboys, just like compound sentence. The fun continued is another independent clause. Right, let's look at the next one. Even though it seems the two were bent on the other's destruction, comma, even though is a subordinating conjunction, so it means that the part starting from it until destruction is basically the dependent clause, right? And then you have a comma here. The cat and mouse were rather fond of one another, comma, and again fanboys neither wanted the other's defeat. So you have two independent clauses combined at the last part of the sentence. And last one, this game was begun thousands of years ago, and it will continue far into the future as other cats and mice revel in hide and seek. Right? This now the first two sentences earlier started with a dependent clause. All right, but the last one, instead of the dependent clause in the beginning of a sentence, we have an independent clause. So we have this game was begun thousands of years ago. So this is independent in the pendant and all right fanboys. Okay, don't forget the comma. It will continue far in the future. Right. So this is the second independent clause. It will continue far in the future, and then obviously we need to have a dependent clause. So the first word which starts the rest of the dependent clause would be the subordinating conjunction. So as is the subordinate conjunction, the other cats and mice revel in hide and seek is basically the dependent clause. So that's quite easy, I think.